Feeding my family healthy and nutritious meals is a very high priority for me, but I also can't be spending my entire day in the kitchen with new recipes or trying to get random unique ingredients from the grocery store. So I have these tried and true meals that our 5 boys and my very active husband all love and gobble up every time we have them. So today I'm going to share with you what we're eating this week as a family of 7. Now, I am a big fan of meal planning, but I don't do meal planning in that I am finding new recipes every single week, going to the grocery store and getting a bunch of random ingredients that will be used for one meal and then sit in the cupboard until they expire. I plan using stuff that is stocked in our pantry. So I actually have a video on how I meal plan, and I have actually also a list of things that I keep stocked in my pantry so that I can have easy, yummy, delicious meals on our table very quickly every single night of the week without much fuss or a whole lot of thought put into it. So one of our go-to meals, we probably have this every week, sometimes twice a week, is meatloaf. My boys absolutely love it. They gobble it up, and if you are a mama, you know that if there's meals that your kiddos love, then you got to make them as much as possible, because sometimes you'll just try a meal and they just don't really love it. And in our home, it's not really an option to not eat the meal, but I do enjoy when it's a meal that the boys all love, that we can all just sit down and enjoy together, and that they eat to their fill. So the first thing that I do is just grab a big bowl out, because I'm going to be using a bunch of meat to make enough for everyone. Put some eggs, some ketchup, some diced onions. And I actually have found that my boys don't like the onions chopped too largely. So I've started using this chopper. I think it's a Ninja chopper or something. I can link it down below if it's something that you want to check out, but it just chops it up very finely so that they don't even really know that the onion is in there. I mean, they know it's there, and they're fine with eating it large too, but it's just not their favorite. So I try to make it smaller for them so that they can enjoy it as much as possible. I always have this baggie of breadcrumbs in the freezer. Anytime I have leftover sourdough that is getting stale or whatever, then I will just break it into pieces, put it on a cookie sheet in the oven so that I can just make some breadcrumbs with it. And then I always have breadcrumbs on hand. I mix up this mixture and then I let it sit for a little bit so that the breadcrumbs can kind of soak up some of the egg and the ketchup and whatnot. And then I move on. Something that we love to have with our meatloaf is potatoes. Now here I'm making mashed potatoes, but my boys, for whatever reason, they would rather have them roasted in the oven, which is fine by me. It's a lot less steps that way. But here I'm just cutting off the little, whatever those are called, eyes of the potato, so that I can pop them in the boiling water to boil to make some mashed potatoes. But it's so funny, they love fries and they love roasted potatoes, but the texture maybe or something of mashed potatoes they're not huge fans of, which I grew up, mashed potatoes was my absolute favorite part of Thanksgiving dinner. I would just fill a whole plate full of mashed potatoes. So I'm not sure where they got the dislike of mashed potatoes from, but that's okay. We are getting ready to move, so I have cleared out all the meat in our freezer, and now we are stuck with using grocery store meat, which is my absolute least favorite. But once we get moved in, I'm hoping to, well, not right away, but hopefully soon, once our friend butchers their cow, we can fill our freezer back up with delicious homegrown meat, not grocery store meat, but it's all right. It does the trick, and I am grateful to have it. Once I get the meat all mixed in really nicely, then I'll pack it into some bread loaf pans That's the easiest way. I've also just made it into like a mound of meat on a cookie sheet, but I like this way better. Then we can kind of cut out slices a little bit easier. Because I use about 3 pounds, so I do like 1.5 times the recipe, I end up with kind of a half of a loaf of meatloaf, which is great because then we have some extras for the week ahead for lunches and just leftovers. Oftentimes by the end of the week, we'll have a dinner that is just leftovers based on whatever little bits and pieces we have in the fridge. I'll just pop everything in the oven, heat it up, and we have a night where you just kind of pick what you want. So now I'm going to mash up our potatoes for dinner. I like to use this hand masher. I read somewhere a long time ago that hand mashing makes them less starchy, and I actually like having a little bit of chunks in my mashed potatoes. Some people like theirs completely smooth, so I don't know that this method would necessarily be the best for you, but I love putting tons of butter in there. I mash it all up, and then I also love adding in tons of milk. I don't have an exact recipe that I follow. I just kind of eyeball it based on how it's looking, mash it all together. If it looks like the right consistency, then I'll call it good. But then I also like to add in garlic and salt. And so I'm just constantly tasting it as I go to try to see if the flavor is where I want it, if there's enough garlic in there, if there's enough salt. I always underestimate how much salt potatoes need to actually get that delicious potato flavor. So I'm always adding a little bit more and then a little bit more, tasting it, then adding a little bit more, tasting it again until it feels, or I guess not feels, but tastes just right. This is my favorite part of meatloaf, and it's the sauce that goes on top. The sauce that I like to make has ketchup, Worcestershire. Is that how you say it? I am probably saying it incorrectly, but it has brown sugar. What else is in it? A little bit of mustard, some salt and pepper, and I think that's about it. But it tastes so good with the little bit of brown sugar that's in it. It's just that yummy, sweet, flavorful, tomatoey taste that we all love in a meatloaf topping. And dinner is served for tonight. A simple but delicious meal of meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Today's meal is going to consist of soup and dinner rolls. This is another absolute go-to for our family. And again, it's something that I always have all of the ingredients for in my pantry and in my freezer so that I'm not scrambling and running to the grocery store last minute or having to buy random ingredients to make this meal. I simply grab everything out of the pantry and I'm good to go. I love to stock my pantry with Azure, and I've shared before what I like to get from Azure. So I can link that video below, or you can find it on my channel, but they have so many great staples, and it's a great way to stock up your pantry so that you can have easy and delicious and healthy meals without having to make a million trips to the grocery store, just shopping from your pantry. Whenever possible, I love to have at least one of my boys helping me in the kitchen. I feel like it's so valuable for them to learn these simple skills of putting together a meal. And this is our little 2-year-old. He, of course, loves turning on the mixer and just helping. He loves putting in the ingredients too. That's probably one of his favorites, is dumping in all of the ingredients. All of our boys love helping with meals, and so if I can grab 1 or 2 of them in the afternoon and have them come sit on the counter and help me, I love it. Dinner rolls. Okay, turn it back off. Flour is another pantry staple that I always have on hand because I'm always baking something. And so to bake something, you need lots of flour. Now, I normally get it from Costco, and it's just their basic unbleached flour, but I've been learning recently about how nutritious whole grains are, and especially freshly milled whole grains. I didn't realize this, but the grains lose their nutrients within like 24 hours. Not all of it, but at least half of their nutrients within the first like 24 to 48 hours of being milled. So when you're buying flour from the grocery store, it's been milled who knows how long ago. And so most of its nutrients are gone. So it's been really interesting to learn more about that. And I am seriously considering getting a grain mill. For the longest time, I thought it just sounded like way more work than it was worth. And it just seemed so much more simple to just have ground up flour already in my pantry. But the more I've thought about it, you buy an electric grain mill, and so you just pour your grains into it and it does all of the grinding for you. So it's maybe an extra 5 minutes of just popping it in there and letting it mill the grains. And during that time, I would be doing other things for prepping for dinner anyways. So it's not like it's lost time at all. So anyways, that's kind of my rationale, and I'm considering getting one. I feel like I am convinced that I should get one. I just need to actually buy it and make it happen. And I know it'll be so fun to learn more about it and to just see the whole process from start to finish. We do have a local grain mill that we like to get our flour from also. But again, it's milled at least a day or two before we purchase it. And so again, a lot of those nutrients are going to be lost in that time frame. So here I'm just kneading out our dinner rolls, and then I let it rest in the bowl that I mixed it in. So I'm not dirtying up any more bowls, but it will rise for maybe an hour or so. It's pretty warm in our house in the winter time. So we like to keep the heat going. So it should rise pretty well. And in the meantime, I'm going to I'll cook some ground beef for our soup. We have a couple of go-to soup recipes that I just know by heart and can just pop them in the cast iron Dutch oven and get them going rather quickly. This one is a minestrone soup, and it has the base of basically any soup, which is onion, celery, and carrots, and then broth. But you brown ground beef and then you saute the onion, celery, and carrots. Put that in a pot with some bone broth and add in some diced tomatoes, some garlic, and some Italian seasoning, and you have a simple minestrone. If you wanted to add pasta to it, you could. Since we're doing the bread, I don't feel the need to have more grains of any kind in our meal. But if you wanted to, you could probably even add rice to it too. That could be a fun way to make it more filling. But we just try to add lots of extra meat to it. My husband doesn't want a soup that is just full of veggies and broth. He wants a nice hearty soup. So we add lots of meat, but then also love to add in lots of veggies too. And then sometimes we like to add in squash too. Sliced squash we'll add in towards the end, since squash it cooks rather quickly. So if you cook it at the same time as, say, all the rest of your vegetables, it will just become mush. But it is a yummy addition to this minestrone soup. Like I said, these are all meals that I always have all of this stuff stocked. So like carrots and celery, it's always in my fridge. If we're running low, then I make sure that we stock up when we're at Costco next, or sometimes I'll just do a small weekly grocery order pickup from like our local grocery store. And so I'll get some extra carrots and celery from there. But I love to get it from Costco because you get a bunch of it and we do go through it rather quickly. We'll use the carrots and celery for snacks and lunches as well. The boys love just snacking on them. We like to make a homemade ranch to dip in them, or the boys will dip the celery in peanut butter along with sliced apples. So it's so nice to have on hand so that I have some sort of veggie to put on their plates at all times. And then I can always make soups and stews and all those things as well. Bone broth is one of those things that I love to make myself whenever possible. Whenever we have a whole bird or some meat with some bones in it, I like to save it in the freezer and then pop it in the stock pot and just let it simmer for days on end. There'll be times where I will actually have a stock pot that will be going with the bones and some onion and celery and carrot ends, and I'll just let that boil for days and I'll pull from it as I need to, and then just add more water, let it simmer and sit on the stove just for a few days. So then I'm just always having fresh broth. But here, this was stuff that I had made prior and stored. And I'm realizing as I'm putting this all in the pot that I need more broth than what I have thawed or defrosted, I guess I should say. And so I'm having to pull out more from the freezer to defrost it, which is totally fine. I'm grateful that I have it to do so. Know what it is about dough, but I just love working with it. Maybe it's just working with my hands, but it just feels so productive and so, I don't know, peaceful maybe, to roll dough, knead dough, I don't know, all the things. So here I'm just rolling out little balls of dough to become our dinner rolls. I have this staple recipe that is very simple. I can use it for bread, for dinner rolls, for pizza crust, for all sorts of things. I can link it for you down in like the description box below if you are looking for a simple bread recipe as well. But it's just instant yeast, which I always keep in my fridge, flour, water, and salt. And you can use it for so many things, like I said. So it's a nice one to have kind of in your homemaking arsenal.
Is that good?
On the menu today is a very simple meal that our family all loves. And again, simple ingredients that I always have on hand. But I'm actually starting this meal first thing in the morning because we have a lot going on today. And so whenever that happens, I like to make sure that dinner is prepped way ahead of time so that it's not something that we are trying to put together on crunch time when everyone is hungry and we're just getting home from an event and the baby wants nursed and all the things. So if I can, throughout the day, I typically have our dinners made at least an hour before dinner time so that evening time when it seems like everyone needs mama or there's just a lot of other things going on, it makes it feel much more peaceful in our home, which I am a huge fan of. So anytime I can create a little bit more order, have systems in place to create a little bit more peace in our home, I am all about that. So this is a whole sleeve of chicken that I think it's chicken thighs. We like to get the thighs more than breasts because it's just a little bit more flavorful, a little bit more nutritious than the breast is. I put it all in a casserole dish. And then what I like to do is just put on some liquid aminos, which is kind of like soy sauce, but it's just without the soy. And then I also like to do coconut aminos too. So what I found is liquid aminos are a lot more salty and coconut aminos have still kind of the similar flavor profile, but they're much more sweet. They have a more like coconut sweetness. Now, I thought that this was coconut aminos, but thankfully I looked at it before I poured it on the chicken. It was actually Worcestershire sauce. And so I just set it to the side and we just used the liquid aminos, which was totally fine. But I just make this simple casserole dish of teriyaki chicken and I pour a bunch of aminos on. I like to keep some to the side so that we can pour it on our actual bowls on our meals at dinner time. But then I also love to sprinkle a little bit of ginger over top. It just adds a little bit more depth of flavor. And then I'll pop it in the oven. Oftentimes I store cast irons in the oven and then forget they're in there when I preheat the oven for something else, which is fine because I can just pop it out and set it on the stove to cool back down and no harm, no foul there. But I'll pop the chicken in the oven, come back and pull it out later. And then in the meantime, I'm going to cook up some rice. So this is, again, a very simple meal, but it's nutritious and filling for our boys. I get my rice from Azure, so it is grown a lot better than most rices are. A lot of rice you can find arsenic and just things in it that you don't want to be consuming because of the way that it's grown and the water that it's grown in and all of that. So I like to get mine from Azure where I know it's going to be a good option for my family. I'll put some butter in the Dutch oven, put my rice in, and then I love to cook our rice in bone broth. It just adds extra protein and extra nutrients to the rice. So anytime I can cook something in bone broth versus just water, I will absolutely do that. And that's why I always have bone broth on hand, because we go through it rather often. It's time to eat, and I'm just going to dish up everyone's bowls here at the counter rather than over at the table. I find with rice, this is a little bit more helpful than bringing the whole pot over to the table, because it just tends to get everywhere as everyone's trying to scoop up their own meals. So I just like to scoop it here and then send them on their way over to the table to eat. Thank you so much for joining me in my kitchen today. I hope that this gave you some inspiration for some simple yet nutritious meals to serve your family this week. Don't forget to check out the description box below, where I'll have links to everything that I mentioned here today. And I hope you have a great week.